Tim's the man.
Mark said Tim's the man. I agree. My mic is really hot. So Tim sang about the power, and that's awesome because that's what we're going to talk about. I think that's actually what we talk about every week, isn't it? The power. But last Sunday, my message was about answering the question, what is the science of mind? I reminded you that the essence of this philosophy that we study and learn is that the innermost God and the highest God are the same God. That is basically the foundational teaching of this philosophy. And when we understand that truth, when we understand that we have as our center, as our very nature, the qualities of God, the creative power of God, we understand that we're not helpless in our lives. We're not subject to the whims of a supreme being, and we're not controlled by forces outside of ourselves. We're just not dancing down the road hoping for good luck or the winds of fate to kind of blow in our direction. We understand actually that we are in the driver's seat of our lives. So today we're going to talk about actually living the science of mind. We're going to talk about we're going to talk about taking what we come here on Sunday to learn. How do we take that to the streets? How do we take that back home with us and actually live it? So what I know is that life is constantly in front of us. Constantly. Things are always happening in our relationships, in our jobs, in our health, and in our finances. Just in life, things are always happening. We're always having a wide variety of experiences and challenge. We're constantly faced with choices to make, reactions to have, emotions that come up, and just experiences to live. It just never, ever stops, does it? Life just keeps presenting itself and asking us to show up and express. And the quality of our response to our lives each day speaks to our mindset, speaks to our belief system and our expectations. The quality of our response to life is what we're here to work on, is what we're here to get better at. What I also know is that Spirit gives each of us an equal measure of life energy. That energy runs through us with every breath we take. It's that life energy that we use as we move through all of the experiences that life has to offer. In Ernest Holmes's radio and television show called This Thing Called Life, he would begin each broadcast with this statement: there is a power for good in the universe greater than you are, and you can use it. That's the power Tim was singing about. The power in the universe greater than you are that is free for you to use. So you might wonder, am I using this power? Always. You are always using this power. You use it every moment of every day. And if we want to understand how we are using it, all we have to do is look around our lives. Our lives reflect the use of the power. So in your mind's eye, just look around and notice your life. And notice how it reflects how you have spent your energy, what you have prioritized and what you have not, what you have focused on, how you have spent your energy with the choices you have made and the reactions that you have had to life. I don't know about you, but I always have parts of my life that I'm super proud of how I've used the power, and I have other areas of my life that kind of give me pause. And it's those moments that send me right back to spiritual mind treatment, right back to affirmative prayer, back to the science of mind to do some more work, to clean up my mind and my reaction to what happens in order to kind of clean up my life itself. Because here's what I know. If we're still breathing, if we're still in our magic suits, we still have stuff to work on. We have things to tweak or to absolutely overhaul, one or the other. Because we're in the middle of our own evolution. You know, we say in our Declaration of Principle that we believe in the individual soul forever unfolding. We are still unfolding. And here's what I also believe that our souls, our highest self, they are not really caring about how long it takes to evolve. You can do it quickly, you can do it slowly. You'll either wake up in this lifetime or the next. It's forever unfolding. So we've come to this physical plane to have human experiences to help us unfold. And the trajectory of our evolution has brought us, each of us, because we're all in this room, the trajectory of our evolution has brought us to this teaching, has brought us to a new level of awareness, a new tool to help us. So as we talked about last week in 1918, 100 years ago, Ernest Holmes began speaking publicly about the science of mind. And in one of his Beverly Hills lectures, he said this: "Our movement will not depend on a talk as I'm giving you now. Our evolution, what it will mean to the world, will not depend on the books that we write." He wrote a lot of books. But it won't depend on the books that we write. It will depend on what we do with it. Because Ernest Holmes understood fully that living the science of mind is the only way it would have a positive impact on the world. This teaching would only be impactful if people actually understood these principles enough to use them. He went on to say, "It is necessary in our movement that we have as many people as possible who will work with us and for us, knowing what they do, why they do it, and how they do it, and then doing it." So we are those people that Dr. Holmes was talking about. Here we are 100 years later in Tampa, learning more about ourselves and how we cooperate with spiritual law and God itself to do the science of mind. So as I already pointed out, you're using the principle, you're using the power all the time. The more you understand how to use it, the more often you can actually use it on purpose. Use it intentionally. Use it in those areas of your life that you still want to overhaul or tweak or fix a little bit. You might as well use it consciously for your own good. And that is where affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment comes in very handy. Because a spiritual mind treatment simply means we're trying to change our mind. We're trying to convince ourselves of a new truth, of a new possibility. And one of the first things that visitors figure out when they come to our center is that we pray really differently. We pray in a way very different than the way most of us were taught. We interact with the power that we call God very differently through our prayers. So what I'm learning is that most of you here have had at least one class where you've broken down and learned the steps of spiritual mind treatment. But if you haven't, I want to share an analogy that helps make a little more sense. And I don't know if she made it up or not, but Reverend Frankie Timmers in New Jersey shared this analogy with the ministers. So there are 5 steps to spiritual mind treatment. And these 5 steps are aligned perfectly to an activity that most of us do all the time. Matter of fact, most of us spent the last month doing a whole lot of this. Online shopping. Okay? Let's see if this helps. Okay, so the first step in an affirmative prayer is when you take the time to recognize the source of all good. In this step, we take the time to describe the power that we're dealing with. We say things like, God is the source. God is the source of all the good that I desire. That's the first step of prayer. So we take that first step in online shopping too, okay? So let's say I want a new sweater, and since periwinkle blue is my favorite color, I'm gonna say I want a periwinkle blue sweater, okay? So the first step is to recognize the source for this sweater. The first step is to recognize a store website that carries my periwinkle blue sweater. Okay? I may go on to remind myself a little bit about that website or the truth of that website. It is a source of my clothes. It has unlimited clothes. It has my periwinkle blue sweater. It's a wonderful store. It has great customer service. And it has free shipping, which is my favorite thing ever. Okay? So the second step in spiritual mind treatment or prayer is when we remind ourselves of our connection to God, our oneness with it. We call that step unification. This is where we say, if God is that, then I am that too. So in our shopping analogy in step 2, I have to connect with the store, right? I have to become one with it. I have to log in. I have to know my password, which is a whole other thing. But I have to connect with it in the online world. I have identified it as my source, and I have connected myself to it. I am a part of that too. Same as in prayer. Get it? Then the third step of affirmative prayer is we describe the good that we desire. We take that time to affirm that our lives are in such a way that we already have the thing that we want to change, or the thing that we want to experience. That's the third step of prayer. Same as our shopping analogy. In the third step, we place our order. We declare that this is the perfect periwinkle blue sweater. We affirm that it is the sweater of our dreams. We realize how great we look in this sweater. We see the model on the website and we imagine ourselves in that periwinkle blue sweater. They always pick the best models, don't they? That you can just come say, that's me wearing that sweater. Third step. The fourth step in prayer is thanksgiving. We accept that our good is ours, and we let that gratitude wash over us, that shopping high just watches over us. In our shopping analogy, we accept our purchase. We allow the thrill of hitting the buy button fill us with glee that our online transaction went through. And guess what? We only push the button once, right? We know better than to push it twice online. We know that our transaction has gone through, because the fifth step is to release and let go. We close our prayer with a very assumptive statement, and so it is. And in our analogy, we disconnect from the website in anticipation of wearing the sweater. This sweater is mine. I am so in possession of this periwinkle blue sweater. I have the perfect outfit to wear with it. It is so mine. It hasn't even arrived in the mail yet, but we know it is ours. We know. That's the feeling you're looking for when you finish an affirmative prayer. That deep conviction that your prayer has been answered even when you don't have the goods yet. It's called faith. And sometimes I think we have more faith in Amazon and the United States Postal Service than we do in treatment. You have to let go and know that your good is yours. So as metaphysicians, as people practicing this teaching, we're constantly moving through these 5 steps if we are living the science of mind. So if you're not comfortable doing a spiritual mind treatment, let's make that a priority for you, because it's really important, because this type of relationship with divine intelligence is the cornerstone of living this philosophy. Reverend David Alt, the senior minister in Atlanta, where I just came from, he used to ask this question: if you were on trial being accused of being a metaphysician, would there be enough evidence to convict you? If you aren't working with spiritual mind treatment and affirmative prayer in your life, where is the evidence that you're living the science of mind? Your life is your laboratory. I mentioned this last week, and I want to emphasize it today, because our lives are constantly showing us our growing edges, or the places where we have the opportunity to take another look at how we're using the power, how we are using it. Our lives are always giving us new opportunities to look at things from another perspective. The truth is, we're all human beings, and being human means that we're going to have a wide variety of experiences. And if you have had an experience, it's a normal human experience. I'll say that again. If you've had an experience, it's a normal human experience. Our souls crave a wide variety of human experiences. Now, we as human beings, we want just certain kinds of experiences. We want all the daisies and all that and the rainbows. But our souls crave a wide variety of experiences. I think there's this idea out there that when we're spiritually evolved enough, when we've figured out all of this spiritual truth, that somehow we're going to be protected from anything kind of wackadoo happening in our lives. This idea that truly evolved people don't experience physical illness, or they don't have challenges, their cars don't break down, no one in their life dies. I mean, everything's just going to be those daisies and rainbows I just mentioned. If we can just learn this philosophy, everything is going to be perfect. If I can just learn to do spiritual mind treatment. But the truth is that no matter how evolved you become, no matter how well you understand spiritual principle, how fervently you can do a spiritual mind treatment, life still happens. Our life remains a laboratory for practicing the science of mind. Something happens and we get to practice. We find ourselves in an unusual situation and we get to practice. Most of the time I don't find myself treating for a periwinkle blue sweater. Most of the time I'm treating for peace of mind, for clarity, for a loving heart, for an ability to respond from a higher place. I'm not imagining a sweater, I'm imagining using my creative power to imagine a moment of forgiveness and unity. I was taught, when I first came to this teaching, I was taught that we start treating for parking places. We start praying for parking places. And then we move on to palaces. And then we move on to partners. But I think we also then move on to treating for peace and poise. We move beyond wanting a thing in the laboratory of our lives and get to a place of wanting a feeling. That is living the science of mind. Affirming our right and perfect place amidst anything human experience can bring. In the laboratory of our lives, we become more and more aware of how we are using the power that Ernest Holmes talks about, and we learn to use it more consciously, more abundantly, more freely, and more joyfully. Because when we work with this long enough, we move from thinking about our ability to use the principles and get to a place where we know we can use the principles. What do you know about living the science of mind? Knowing is not real until it is embodied, until it becomes who you are, until it becomes a part of just your nature. How often do we hear someone else say the words, I know? That's often what we say when another person has pointed out something they wish we knew. We kind of brush them off and say, I know. So how many of you have learned how to drive a stick shift? A good many of us, right? So it's like when you're learning to drive a stick shift, the person that's in the passenger seat trying to teach you how to drive a stick shift keeps reminding you to push in the clutch. And you say, I know, just as the engine begins to sputter, right? I know. Most good teachers who are sitting in that seat, what they really want to say is, well, if you knew it, then why didn't you do it before the engine died, right? The reason they don't say it is because they don't want to walk home. But anyway, we don't really know something until we embody it or until we're living it, until the engine doesn't sputter anymore when we switch gears, until we are living it. Until then, it's just a thought or an idea or a concept. That clutch is a really good concept until you learn it and it becomes second nature, just an integral part of your experience. You don't even have to think about it anymore until we finally know it. That's when we can say we know it. I know to push the clutch in because the engine doesn't sputter anymore, right? We don't even think about it. And the science of mind is a beautiful thought, a powerful idea, a transformational concept. And if we can keep practicing it and applying it, if we can keep pushing in the clutch at the right moment in our spiritual hearts, our engine won't sputter. If we can engage these principles over and over in our lives until we know that the innermost God and the highest God are the same God, we will find ourselves actually living the science of mind. Living this teaching is all about mindfulness and discipline. Let me talk about those two concepts. Mindfulness is so important because mindfulness brings us to this moment. The practice of mindfulness is practicing being right here, right now. Bringing your focus and your attention to this current moment. For in this moment lies all possibility. We spend so much time in our minds in the past, don't we? Our thoughts wander backwards so much. If we aren't careful, we're just replaying conversations, we're reviewing past mistakes or past victories, or just looking back at regrets or coulda, shoulda, wouldas, thoughts about scenarios in the past. And the other place that we find our minds going is into the future. We're lost in dreaming about the future or worrying about the future. What if, what if, what if? You know, if our thoughts are either one of those two places, we feel helpless. And the reason you feel helpless is because you are. You are helpless. You cannot change one moment of the past. You're helpless to change that. So if you're all the way in the past, you're in a helpless place. If you're projecting yourself into the future, you're helpless. You cannot do anything about the future. This moment is the powerful one. This moment. Mindfulness brings your focus and attention into the powerful moment that is right now. And guess what else is in this moment? The universal power of God is in this moment. In this moment, you can think a new thought. In this moment, you can affirm your connection to life. In this moment, you can know your power and make a choice from that place. Practice mindfulness. Wake yourself up in mindfulness. Cultivate a practice of mindfulness throughout the day. Put yourself to bed in mindfulness, because in mindfulness you're powerful in choosing consciously. The second part is discipline, and what I just described about mindfulness requires discipline. Staying awake to your thoughts requires approaching your mind in a disciplined way. Whatever we do with discipline is powerful and impactful. Think about that. Our lives show us what we do with discipline and what we don't do with discipline. Let your life reflect a greater level of discipline with living in the moment. You are a powerful, creative being. You're an expression of God unlike any other. Spirit has infused your very being with life itself, and all possibility of good, of harmony, of peace and joy and love and beauty is awaiting your acceptance of it. The only thing that blocks your reception of all these things is a belief that you are somehow separate from it. A belief that somehow you are uniquely different and removed from this power. Living the Science of Mind, in that book it says, we should increase our receptivity and have greater faith if we wish to experience a larger degree of livingness. Our bowl of acceptance must be held up so that the outpouring of Spirit may be measured into our individual experience of life. Use the power that you have been given to create a bigger bowl of acceptance that Spirit can fill. And hold that bowl up for the outpouring of blessings that are yours, because your periwinkle blue sweater is on its way. Live with the Science of Mind, and so it is. There is magic in living this teaching. Lives can be transformed. That's why I'm a minister, because this teaching transformed my life, and I want to give that opportunity to as many people as possible to understand that you are powerful, beautiful, and creative. That's what I know.